Thank you so much, Rabbi Mark. I'm just feeling really grateful to be here with all of you. It's only my third time teaching the IJS Daily Sit, and it feels like such an honor. Um, as I was reflecting earlier today, what kept coming up for me, and we see this reflected in the chat, is just how much is unfolding on our planet that can be hard for our nervous systems to know how to navigate. As one of my teachers puts it, my teacher, Megan, she'll often say, what's here that can meet the too muchness of it all? What's here that can meet the too muchness of it all? And in the midst of that, one of the wisest choices that each of us can make is showing up for ourselves and showing up for each other in communities like this one. And so maybe just taking a moment right now to send a loving smile or a hand on the heart or whatever expression of care you'd like to offer to each of us here. And embedded in that is a sense of gratitude as well. Thank you for coming together in this way with me. If I was going to give what I'm about to share a title, I would call it What's in a Name? So this week, we're moving into the second book of the Torah, Shmot, the book of Exodus. And it's always struck me as strange that Shmot is translated as Exodus when what it actually means is names. The first sentence in Shmot, the first sentence in the book of names, reads, "These are the names of the children of Israel who came down from Egypt." And then that's followed by a list of their names. So in the spirit of Shmot, in the spirit again of this book of names, today I just want to offer a brief reflection on the power of naming and names and what any of that has to do with meditation practice in the 21st century. In Judaism, names really matter. And our tradition encourages us to bring thoughtful awareness to both names and naming. So sometimes naming reminds us of who we are or where we come from, whether we give that name to ourselves or we're gifted that name. As an example, my parents named me after my paternal grandmother, Alice, Zikrono Livracha. She died the year before I was born. And a name might also identify a specific value or trait or quality. So one of my relatives gave himself the Hebrew name Sason, meaning joy. And then, and I'm going to pivot a bit from the names we've been given by parents or loved ones, or that we've gifted to ourselves in the way that I just named. There are also the names or labels that we call ourselves internally that we may not even be aware of, and that we can also bring compassionate awareness to. So these are names like the helpful one, or the critical one, or the funny one, or the one who always, and you can just fill in the blank. And these internal names develop as a result of many different aspects of our lives: family dynamics, our experiences in school, personality tendencies, the culture that we grew up in or that we're living in now. And our sense of self-worth or lack thereof can become really tied up with these internal names. Mindfulness practice can help us bring these names above the line of awareness so that we can really access a greater wisdom and compassion about how to meet the moments of life and living it in ways that are not dictated by how we've come to call ourselves. In my early 20s, I was early on in meditation practice, very early on. And I was also working as a high school teacher in the New York City public schools. Time and time and time again, I would notice the tendency to offer help to a student when what they really needed in that moment was time and space to figure something out on their own. So awareness was illuminating a habitual pattern of behavior. And so I would pause and listen inwardly. And often in these moments, I could hear Alison, the helpful one. Alison, the helpful one. The quote I'm about to share comes from the mindfulness teacher and peace activist, Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away in 2022. He offers, many of us try to do many things, yet the more we act, the more troubled our family, society, and world become, because the foundation of our being is not yet stable enough. Improve your quality of being through meditation and mindfulness practice. To be in the here and now, fully alive, fully present, is a very positive contribution to any situation. This is the practice of non-practice, the action of non-action. We improve the quality of our being so that we have peace, and then we can offer it to our families and communities and to the world, sometimes through wise action. So I share this because so much of what this practice invites us to do is pause, return to our present moment experience again and again and again, so that in our daily lives, we can exercise compassionate discernment about what any given moment is really asking of us. And so let's move into a period of practice. I call this practice, speaking of names, I've named this practice permission to pause. And I'll be guiding us through for about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have a few minutes in quiet together. And before we move into this, you might just move your body in whatever way feels right. Maybe there's a bit of a stretch, maybe some facial yoga. The first foundation of mindfulness is bringing awareness to the body and its needs and tending to it with care. And so you might find your way to whatever posture feels right. And maybe that's sitting, maybe that's standing, maybe that's lying down. Again, listening to your own body. Before I begin offering permission to pause guidance, just a reminder that each of us is different and we might have different things arise for us during the practice. And if at any point something comes up that feels beyond your range of resilience or beyond your window of tolerance, just listening to that, opening the eyes, shifting your gaze, taking a drink of water, and remembering that stopping in the midst of a meditation practice doesn't make you a bad meditator. It actually means that you're really, with awareness, sensing into what's right for you, which is what this practice is about in the first place. So just taking care of yourself in whatever ways feel right and bringing awareness to that process. If it feels right, you might close your eyes or soften your gaze. And in whatever posture you're in, inwardly whispering to yourself, Hineni, here I am. And perhaps also, Hinenu, here we are. Hineni, here I am. At the beginning of a period of meditation. Hinenu, here we are. At the beginning of a period of meditation. And you might be noticing restlessness or calm, sleepiness, anxiety, joy or judgment, whatever may be here now, honoring that this too belongs. This is just part of the experience of being human, whatever may be visiting. And inwardly whispering to yourself, permission to pause. This invitation, you might notice wherever your body is connected to a surface behind you or beneath you, whether that's the floor or a chair or the sofa. Permission to pause. You might be noticing the body breathing itself. Inflow becoming outflow, outflow becoming inflow. And it might be that thinking's happening or emotions are passing through, and you're noticing some sensations, some bodily sensations. Nothing to fix or change, nothing to do or make happen. No one you need to be. Just reconnecting to your own wholehearted humanity. Friendly, mindful awareness of what's here now. And if you notice, there's a lot happening in the mind, that the mind is, as it often does, secreting thought after thought after thought. It might be supportive to let your attention rest on an anchor or a home base. And that might be where you notice the breath most clearly, the rise and fall of the belly or chest, or the whole body expanding and contracting with the sensations of breath. Could be that the soles of the feet are a good anchor for you. Or the feeling of your hands resting in your lap or wherever they may be. It might be sound, receiving sound as a way of returning and reawakening to this moment in time. And so if you'd like to, just choosing one anchor and letting your attention rest there. Permission to pause. and anchor. This process of returning again and again and again to the here and now, which is really the portal to our own innermost wisdom. We need to be here, pausing, attuning, dropping in to really be able to access that deep knowing about how to meet life moment by moment by moment. And so let's take the next few minutes as a community to practice together. Feel free to return to your anchor or to rest your attention there. Or you might just periodically drop in the phrase permission to pause and see how the body, mind, and heart respond. What's here now? Maybe gently scanning your body, sensing into your heart. Just bringing open, kind, compassionate awareness to whatever you notice. And you might sense, is there something you could offer in response? What might your innermost wisdom offer? Whether that's in the form of a blessing or a hand on the heart. Maybe it's words of gratitude or encouragement. It could be a deep breath in, a deep breath out. Blessing ourselves with whatever's called for, with whatever honors our current experience. May our practice together, may it help us remember the sacred power of giving ourselves permission to pause and tap into who we are beyond any and all names. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. A beautiful practice. And we seal it, as we do each day, friends, by offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the Kaddish, to do so. If you're not reciting Kaddish, we ask that you please stay present, offer your presence and compassion and support for those who are grieving. You can put the name or names of those you are honoring today in the chat. And I'm going to add mine to as well. Saying Kaddish today for a dear friend of mine, Alan Gerson, and invite those of you who are reciting Kaddish to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitkadal, Yitkadal, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yama Dibra, Yirute, Yamich Malchute, Chayechon, Yomechon, Uchaye, Dechol Beit Yisrael, Bagala, Ikari, Yiru,
Amen.
Shmei Rabba Noach, Olam Amen. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Bahar, Yitzchak, Yidar, Yidar,
Shakri,
Laela
Shirakata,
Dushkafata Mata Anurama Ilhi Shlama Rava Shai Malenu Koi Israel Ose Shalom
Ase Shalom Bimama, Ase Shalom, Alenu Bakho Yisrael, Bakho Yishtevel. Amen.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. If you're leaving us now, hope you'll be with us tomorrow. Be led in practice by Chaplain Marita Anderson tomorrow, and on Friday by Cantor Kara Spencer Shapiro as we sit into Shabbat together. And we hope to see you tomorrow or sometime soon. Want to send our love, support, and prayers, especially to those of you in the LA area, Southern California area affected by the fires, continuing to pray for safety, for an abatement of the winds, for the rain to fall, for the fires to be contained, and for those who have suffered loss to be consoled and supported and blessed with the support needed to rebuild. Thanks to Natalie Rushinoff, who's held our space today, as always, with skill and grace, and to Rebecca Leary Stefan for sponsoring our practice and honor the leadership team of Mindful Moments at Congregation Beit Chaverim. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your support and for lifting up and honoring that leadership team. As always, you're invited to stay on to reflect on your experience of this beautiful practice today in the chat, to ask a question for our teacher today, Alison Cohen, who will join me in a moment. If you're asking a question, please write question all in caps in the chat, and I will keep an eye out for that and try to work your question into the conversation. And oops, let's get us both in here. Here we go. Okay. Alison, thank you so much. Really, it was just what I can't speak for everyone, certainly what I needed today, and really appreciate it. Jacqueline, I just want to remind people unfortunately, we can't let people unmute, but if you have a question or comment or anything you want to share, please do so in the chat. One of my names is Mark the Quipster. And so I was going to quip, and I will, that Alison the Helper, it's really funny because I have the same, we have the same name, and I want to invite people who also share the name of so-and-so the Helper to, wave your hand to be recognized. The first question I have for you actually had to do with that the anecdote or experience that you shared as a teacher about that inclination or the reaction to offer help, to the students rather than give them the time and space to work it out. I'm just curious about that in terms of at what point did you recognize that? Like, did you recognize that while you were teaching, or was that in retrospect?
That's a great question. And I just also want to say thank you for all the kind notes in the chat. I would be hearting them right now, but I'm not going to multitask. So just much gratitude. Mark, I would say that some of it became clear to me as I was teaching. And then it was really actually on my first meditation retreat that the full scope of it was illuminated. And that was a few years into teaching. And I was on a week-long silent retreat with people ages 18 to 35 or something along those lines. And at one point during one of the sits, my eyes opened because I heard some rustling, and I noticed another one of my community members leaving the room, and she looked really upset. And I immediately got up from my cushion and raced after her out of the meditation hall. And by the time I got there, she was already being cared for and in the loving embrace of one of the teachers. And I said, oh, I was just coming to check and see how I could help. And the teacher said, Allison, as we've shared with you before, that's our job.
Hmm.
You're here to learn how to tend to your own inner world and experience. And we'll be tending to. So thank you for your kindness. And also, this is not your place.
Hmm.
And initially, I felt, I can't think of another way of describing it in this moment, but I felt this sense of my ego rattling or something.
Hmm.
And then as I walked back into the hall, I realized, oh, there wasn't really discernment present. I didn't scan the room and notice that a teacher was already going to support her.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped up from this place of autopilot. And it allowed me to pause and feel a deep sense of self-compassion for all of the causes and conditions that had led to this becoming such a key piece of how I perceived myself, the oldest of four children, siblings with a variety of health needs, all of the many ways in which I had felt like I needed to parent others from such a young age. Not to mention being the only girl in a large family. And then there was also a sense of empowerment. Oh, this practice is reminding me and awakening for me the recognition that in any given moment, I can pause and check in. What's
Mm-hmm.
really the wise response here? And so as I went back into the world of teaching, that was so much more above the line of awareness for me. And I could notice if what I was about to offer would actually just be enabling some kind of learned helplessness,
Mm-hmm.
or if it was actually of benefit. And I will say that one question that's arisen for me time and time again is, who am I without the label of the helpful one?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to get to the questions in the chat. There are some good questions in the chat, but let's stay with that for a second. At some point in the practice, you kind of alluded to that or described that state. I think you did about where maybe I don't know, maybe I'm going a little crazy. Maybe I read something in the last 24 hours about this, but how would you describe that state when we're like, are we just like, is this a practice where we're simply stripping away those labels and titles and names? And then we don't have a name for what's underneath that, but it's the practice itself is actually just sort of releasing, surrendering, and being open to whatever is there if it's not that, you know, if it's not the helper, if it's not the whatever, fill in the blank. Is there a name for the that, or is the that the stripping away?
Well, I would say many scholars, spiritual teachers, and people across the planet attempt to name that.
Mm-hmm.
And there can be value in that if it's supportive for you.
Right. But
Like,
it's certainly
oh,
not the start. It's not the starting point for sure.
right. And also, who knows? Who knows what? I think my inclination when it comes to naming that which is kind of both beyond and embracing all of who we are, regardless of names,
Mm-hmm.
is if there's a name that supports you in your process of
Mm-hmm.
being human in the 21st century, which is a pretty impossible ask that each of us is courageously living into,
Mm-hmm.
then use that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, mm, part of what the practice is reminding us of is that we're ever evolving beings, and what's needed in a given moment may be different than another moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when we can hold those aspects of identity a little bit more lightly and perhaps with a
Right.
bit more humor and compassion, we
Mm-hmm.
see there's so much more here. I will say from a Jewish perspective, it's been
Oops. Frozen, frozen for a second there, Allison. We'll wait for you. we will give ourselves permission to pause.
Oh, I'm
You're
sorry.
back.
I
You're
think
back. You're
I'm
back.
back. Okay.
I was
And
on the edge of my seat from a Jewish perspective.
oh yeah. One of the things that's been most helpful for me, especially during this era, where I often
Mhm.
feel like I want to give of myself in so many different directions, and
Right.
sometimes I actually end up feeling a bit paralyzed or overwhelmed by all of the need there is, and also a genuine, not just from a place of naming, a genuine
Mhm.
desire to help. And then sometimes I notice, because there's a lot of 21st century tropes about how our value and our worth is connected to how much we do, that we're human beings, we're
Right.
human doings rather than human beings. Judaism and the understanding that each of us is B'Tselem Elohim, made in the image of the divine source, and that my worth comes from being
Mhm.
a sacred, divinely inspired being,
Mhm.
not from
The doing.
the doing.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that there's not real value and importance in
Right.
doing.
Right.
But when those become conflated,
Mhm.
self-worth and doing, we move into dangerous territory. And for me, one of the fundamental pillars of Jewish spirituality is you are worthy because you are human and you are B'Tselem Elohim. And may you never forget that.
Right. Let's underline and highlight what you just said. That was beautiful. Thank you. Um, let's use that to segue to Lori's question, that you at the end of the practice you mentioned something, and I might have missed this, but or kind of heard it. You invited, it was an invitation to quote, give back in return.
Mhm.
Um, so that kind of pointed towards action arising out of the pause, I
Yeah.
think, right? So you want to say a little bit more about that? Lori said that threw her off a bit, maybe
Yeah.
others.
Thanks for naming that, Lori. So one of the misconceptions about this practice is that we're being encouraged to in some way be passive.
Hmm.
And mindfulness has different orientations. There can be receptivity, and there can also be more of an active response depending on what we've noticed. And so part of the reason why I sometimes offer that invitation at the end of sits is just to plant the seed, just to remind us that in any given moment, when we become aware of something unfolding internally, the practice isn't saying, okay, well, there's nothing to do about that, or there's nothing to respond to about that, that we
Hmm.
have the agency and the choice to honor what's ever here and to be responsive to our own suffering, to our own gratitude, to whatever it may be.
Hmm.
Um, and let's say I notice, oh, there's a lot of heartache. The practice invites, okay, you might rest a hand on the heart, honor that, tend to it. Or, oh, I'm noticing deep joy in this moment. Ah, it feels good to feel joy. Can I let that kind of imprint, as Dr. Rick Hansen would say, can I install the joy?
Hmm. Say that again. Can I
Can I
install?
install the joy? And yeah, can I install it? Neuroscience shows if there's something that's good for our well-being, for our hearts, for our
Hmm.
nervous systems, if we can
Hmm.
savor that for 10 to 15 seconds, it moves it into more of long-term memory that will
Hmm.
then become a part of what we can resource from.
Right. There was a
Mark,
question. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to respond. There are some really kind and uh, kind of protective of me comments in the
Right.
chat about how the facilitators responded. And I just want to say, I probably didn't the tone I used or the way I explained it didn't get to the heart of how I, or one, how they said it or how I received it. And actually, it felt really important for me to hear at the time. And it didn't actually feel patronizing. It was as if they energetically recognized something in me. And there was a sense of wanting to help me see my own patterning, which is literally exactly what happened. And so I apologize if I shared the story in a way that made it sound like in some way these teachers were being condescending. That isn't actually how I experienced it, but also I'm deeply touched in the chat by the level of kindness and supportiveness that exists in this community. So thank you for that.
That's great to hear. Yes, I'm into that. That's true. And just to close, this is such a we could go on for a while. This is such a wonderful conversation. Um, you were talking about wearing the names lightly, or thinking about the garments of those names, that they're not our essential self, but that they're maybe facets of ourselves. And I love that installation, to install the qualities in us. In the same way, I was thinking about kind of discarding or working on uninstalling. Like there was a question from Jacqueline about how do we, when we identify as a helper, how do we make sure we prioritize ourselves when the helper role is very overwhelming or has been self-destructive? I'm just going to edit, um, uh, extemporize about that, about releasing, about kind of discern. What I'm hearing from you is,
Yeah.
which often comes up, is that the essential self is, like you said, is the self that is created b'Tselem Elohim, that is innately has worth, right? Without doing.
Yeah.
And then there are these aspects of ourselves that are relating to doing, and it's not that they're bad, in fact, not at all, but that they're not our. We have to remain mindful that they're not our essential self, and we can kind of. I like this, metaphor of like basically checking the wardrobe, say like, what does this moment call for in terms of wearing, or what's ready to be donated, or
That's so great.
or recycled, of ourselves that no longer serves us, maybe served us for a while, like the helper costume.
Right. And also, sometimes if that label is so ingrained, we won't see the moments. Oh, sorry, I was just
Yeah.
distracted for a moment by the chat. But what I'll say is yes, yes to what you just named, Rabbi Mark. And this is also just an area for curiosity and exploration and inquiry. And if I can close with an interesting story about naming.
Sure.
I was on a month-long retreat actually a few years ago, and I was so deeply moved by one of the teacher's teachings. And in my one-on-one with her, I essentially said, "Thank you so much, oh wise one." I said, "Your wisdom, wow." And she smiled at me with so much kindness, and she said, "Sometimes the causes and conditions come together and wisdom arises. In other moments, the causes and conditions come together and stupidity arises." And she said, "You've caught me in some of the wise moments where this is how it all came together." And as she said that, my body felt so much more spacious. There was such a sense of, oh, right, I don't need to cling to this or cling to that. I can incline through practice the heart, body, and mind to show up more consistently with wisdom, with compassion, with discernment. And along the way, can I make space for the full range of being human and also cultivate compassion? Cultivate compassion. Yeah. For wow, it's a wild ride and we're beautifully imperfect. And so I'll pause there, but I
All
just
right.
love that.
That's
Wisdom
great.
and
Thank you.
stupidity.
Yeah, that was worth a little bit of overtime to hear that story. Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank
All right,
you.
Allison, we'll look forward to your next visit. Very much appreciate you being part of this ride with us together, and for this beautiful practice today. Thanks, Natalie, for holding us. Thanks each of you for being here. Many blessings, everyone. Hope to see you
Many
tomorrow.